They say some children come into this world crying for milk. Emmanuel came into this world holding his umbilical cord like he was afraid someone would charge him for it. That is what his mother, Mama Emmanuel, always laughed about when she told the story, though in later years she stopped laughing. From the very beginning, Emmanuel Adewale was different. While other children in the neighborhood would cheerfully spend the 20 naira their parents gave them on sweets and biscuits, Emmanuel would fold his tightly in his small palm, walk all the way to the market and back, and come home with the 20 naira still intact, plus the change from a favor he had cleverly arranged with the pepper seller. He never explained how. He just smiled and tucked the money away into his little tin box under the bed. His father, Mr. Adewale, a quiet civil servant with tired eyes and a warm heart, used to watch his son with a mixture of pride and worry. "Emmanuel," he would say, sitting him down on the veranda in the evenings, "money is a tool, not a god. You must learn to use it, not worship it." Emmanuel would nod, then go and check his tin box to make sure nothing had moved. His mother, Mama Emmanuel, would often tell her friends, "That boy of mine, if you ask him to buy salt, he will come back and tell you he found a cheaper option, then he will keep the difference." They tried everything. His parents gave him extra pocket money, hoping generosity would come with abundance. It didn't. They sent him to buy things for neighbors so he could feel the joy of being useful to others. He came back with leftover change he had negotiated from the seller and pocketed it. They took him to church where the pastor preached about the blessings of giving. Emmanuel dropped the smallest coin he could find in the offering basket and held the rest like his life depended on it. By the time Emmanuel was a teenager, his tight-fistedness had become neighborhood legend. His friends knew not to expect him to contribute to group snacks. His classmates knew better than to borrow anything from him, not because he'd refuse, but because he would charge interest. Small, polite, but real interest. His parents prayed, his mother fasted, his father talked until his voice grew thin. But Emmanuel grew into a man exactly as he had been a boy, except now the tin box under the bed had become a bank account, and the bank account was growing very, very fat. The woman who didn't know what she was walking into. Her name was Blessing, and God knows she deserved every letter of it. Blessing Okafor was 26 years old, beautiful in the quiet way that sneaks up on you, the kind of beautiful that becomes more obvious the more you know her. She was a teacher at a private primary school, patient by profession and by nature, with a laugh that could fill a room and a heart so open it could fit the whole world inside it. She met Emmanuel at a wedding. He was well-dressed. He was always well-dressed because he believed looking poor was bad for business. He was charming that day, attentive, spoke well. He told her he was in logistics, that he was building something serious, that he was a family man at heart. He bought her a drink. One drink. She didn't notice that when the waiter came for round 2, Emmanuel had somehow moved to the other side of the hall. They dated for 8 months. In those 8 months, Emmanuel was strategic. He took her out, but always to places he had found a deal. He bought her gifts, but never anything that couldn't be returned. He was never rude, never cruel. He was just careful. Blessing mistook careful for responsible. She thought she was marrying a man who would build a home, not guard a vault. Her mother warned her, "Blessing, that man, every time I see him, his hands are in his pockets. Even when he greets people, his hands are in his pockets. Watch him." Blessing laughed it off. "Mommy, you are overthinking. He's just a simple man." "Simple?" her mother replied, pulling her wrapper tighter. "Simple men give. Simple men share. Watch the hands, my daughter. The hands never lie." They married in December. The wedding was modest. Emmanuel had negotiated the catering, the hall, the music, and even the flowers to the very last kobo. Guests talked about what a careful planner the groom was. A few of the older women exchanged glances over their plates and said nothing. The first sign came 3 weeks after the wedding. Blessing had gone to the supermarket to restock the kitchen. The normal things: tomatoes, cooking oil, onions, seasoning, rice. When Emmanuel saw the receipt, his face changed. Not angry, not loud, just cold, like a door closing slowly. "From now on," he said, folding the receipt carefully, "write me a list. I'll do the shopping." Blessing blinked. "I can do the shopping, Emmanuel." "I know, but I know the right places. You spend too much here." She thought it was once. It wasn't. Every week after that, she would write the list, hand it to him, and he would disappear to some market she had never been to, returning with bags of items, always the right items, always slightly less than what she'd asked for, always with a brief explanation. "The big size was too expensive. This one is the same thing." Or, "I found a place that sells 3 for the price of 1. The food was fine, the house was always stocked, but Blessing had no money. None. Not a single note that was hers. She had stopped working when they married. Emmanuel had insisted on it, warmly, even lovingly. "I don't want my wife to stress herself. I will take care of everything." And he did take care of everything. Everything on his list, everything he decided, but nothing beyond it. If she needed sanitary pads, she had to ask. If she needed new shoes because her old ones had worn through, she had to present a case. If her mother fell sick and she needed transport money, there was a conversation, a review, a pause, and sometimes at the end of it all, a small sum pressed into her hand with the energy of someone giving away a piece of their soul. She did not tell anyone for a long time. What would she say? That her husband fed her, clothed her, housed her, and still she was suffering? The words sounded ungrateful in her own head, but the loneliness of having no money, no independence, no ability to simply buy yourself a biscuit when you wanted one, that kind of loneliness has no name. It just sits in the chest and grows heavier every day. Twice a year, Emmanuel would announce a trip. Business, he said. He would pack his bag the night before, check the house, leave some food in the freezer and say, "There's rice and stew, should last you 4 or 5 days." Then he would hug her and leave. No transport money, no in case something comes up money, no emergency fund, just rice and stew in the freezer and a closed door. The first time it happened, Blessing sat in the quiet house and felt a kind of shame she couldn't explain. She was a grown woman with a degree, former salary, her own life, and she was counting spoons of rice to make sure there was enough until he came back. She called his number. "Emmanuel, you didn't leave me any money." Silence. Then, "For what? There's food in the freezer. What do you need money for?" She hung up. She didn't call back. Mama Emmanuel had grown old, but not blind. She lived 20 minutes away in the same house where she had raised her son, and she visited every Sunday after church without fail. She would sit in Blessing's kitchen, watch the girl move around and notice things, the fading wrapper, the hairline that hadn't been done in weeks, the way Blessing smiled just a little too hard when someone asked if she was okay. One afternoon, Blessing couldn't hide it anymore. Her mother-in-law had brought a small cooler of soup. She always brought something, and as they sat together in the living room, her eyes filled with tears she hadn't planned to cry. "Mama," she said quietly, "I don't have money. I haven't had money in my hand for 2 weeks." Mama Emmanuel did not look surprised. She looked tired. She looked like a woman hearing a familiar song she had hoped never to hear again. She reached into her bag and pressed 3,000 naira into Blessing's palm. "Take it. Don't tell him I give you." Blessing stared at the money. 3,000 naira from her mother-in-law, in secret, like a contraband, in her own house. "I warned him," Mama Emmanuel said, her voice low and heavy. "Since he was small, I warned him. Money is not your friend. It cannot hold you when you are sick. It cannot laugh with you. It cannot pray for you." But he never listened. God forgive me. I raised that boy and I don't know where this thing in him came from. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her head tie. Then she straightened up, because Mama Emmanuel was not a woman who stayed down for long. "But you, my daughter, you must survive. Keep this. Don't ask him, don't beg him. Build your own small reserve, quietly, and keep talking to God. Something has to break in that man. Something must break." From that day, Mama Emmanuel became Blessing's quiet lifeline. A little money here, a bag of foodstuff there, a secret phone top-up when Emmanuel had forgotten to pay for Blessing's airtime. Small mercies from a mother-in-law who loved her son, but was not blind to what he was doing to her wife. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Emmanuel came home from work in high spirits. His business had landed a big contract. He sat at the dinner table and announced it with the glow of a man who felt the universe had rewarded him personally. "God has been good," he said, serving himself a generous portion of Blessing's egusi soup. Blessing watched him eat, watched him smile, watched him reach for his phone to check the balance notification that had just pinged through. "Emmanuel," she said, her voice calm, "our daughter's school fee is due. They've sent 3 reminders, and she needs a new school bag. The zip broke." "How much is the bag?" 4,000 naira. 4,000 naira for his school bag. Where are they selling this bag, Blessing? London? "Emmanuel, she needs a bag. Let me check online first. You people don't know how to find good prices." Blessing put down her spoon, carefully, slowly, the way a person puts down something fragile before they say something that cannot be taken back. "You just received a large contract payment. Our daughter needs a 4,000 naira school bag. You are sitting here eating soup I cooked with the last ingredient in this house, and you want to price check a child's school bag." Emmanuel looked up. I have not had money in my hand in 11 days, Blessing continued, and her voice did not shake, which surprised even her. "I called your mother 3 times this month because I needed soap. Soap, Emmanuel. I am your wife. I live in this house, and I had to call your mother for soap." The room was very quiet. "I am not asking you to be reckless. I am not asking you to waste money. I am asking you to remember that there is a human being living in this house with you. I am asking you to treat me like your wife, not like a ward in your budget." Emmanuel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The contract notification sat on his phone screen between them like a third presence at the table. Outside, their daughter's laughter floated in from the compound where she played. Inside, a marriage stood at a crossroads it had been approaching for 3 long years. He stood up from the table, walked to the room, came back, set some notes on the table without a word. Then he picked up his plate and went to eat in the bedroom. Blessing looked at the money. It was not an apology. It was not an acknowledgement. It was just money, given the way Emmanuel gave everything, as a transaction, not a gift. She left it on the table and went to bathe her daughter. Some things cannot be bought back once they are lost. The warmth that Blessing had walked into the marriage with, that bright, open, laughing warmth, began to dim the way a candle dims in a closed room. Not all at once, not with one fight, but slowly, morning by morning, closed hand by closed hand. She stopped telling Emmanuel things, not because she was rebellious, but because she was tired of the math that followed every conversation. She stopped dreaming aloud about the kitchen renovation she wanted, the trip home she had been planning for 2 years, the small business idea she had once sketched out in a notebook. Everything she said became an invoice to be reviewed. And so she said less and less, until some days she said almost nothing at all. Their daughter, little Adaize, was 7 years old and already learning things no 7-year-old should need to know. She had learned not to ask daddy for things directly. She had learned to go to mommy, who would go quiet, then say, "We'll see." She had learned that the atmosphere in the house changed when money was mentioned. Children absorb these things. They carry them without understanding them, and they grow up and make choices in love, in marriage, in how they handle money, shaped by rooms they once sat in silently. Mama Emmanuel visited one afternoon and found Blessing sitting outside alone, her eyes far away. The older woman sat beside her for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "My daughter, a man who loves you will loosen his hands for you. Love does not grip, love opens." Emmanuel was making more money than he had ever made. His business was expanding, his accounts were growing. By every measure that he cared about, things were going well. But in the house, in the space between him and his wife, something essential had quietly packed a bag and started walking toward the door. He did not notice, or perhaps he noticed and did not know what to do. Or perhaps the tin box from childhood, now replaced by 7-figure bank balances, had grown so large inside his chest that there was simply no room left for anything else to live there. One evening, his childhood friend Kunle came to visit. They sat on the veranda drinking cold water. Emmanuel had offered water. And Kunle watched Blessing move quietly through the house with the careful steps of someone who had learned to take up less space. When Blessing had gone inside, Kunle looked at his friend for a long time. Then he said, "Emmanuel, is your wife happy?" Emmanuel frowned. "She has everything she needs." "That's not what I asked." Silence. "Emmanuel," Kunle said, leaning forward, "I've known you since primary school. You used to hide your pencil so nobody would borrow it. You still remember? You hid your pencil as a child. We all laughed then." He paused. "It's not funny anymore, my brother. The pencil has turned into your wife's dignity. You cannot hold everything so tight and expect people to stay." Emmanuel said nothing. He turned his cup of water slowly in his hands. And somewhere inside a chest that had been clenched for 30-something years, something small, quiet, almost undetectable, shifted. This story does not have a neat ending, not yet. Because people like Emmanuel do not change overnight, and people like Blessing do not recover in a week, and children like Adaize carry what they've seen for years before they understand it. But here is what is true. Emmanuel heard Kunle's words that night. He turned them over in his mind in the dark, while Blessing slept with her back to him. He thought about his mother pressing secret money into his wife's hand. He thought about the quiet that had settled into his home, like furniture nobody chose but nobody moved. He thought about the little tin box and what it had cost him. The question this story leaves with you is not about Emmanuel. It is about the people who know an Emmanuel. The woman who is writing grocery lists she never gets to shop from. The mother-in-law who has been quietly filling the gaps. The children watching and learning. The friend who finally said what everyone else was afraid to say. What is money for if the people beside you are quietly starving? Not for food, but for dignity, for freedom, for the simple human feeling of being trusted with a little of what you've built together. Emmanuel is real. He has 1,000 faces and 1,000 names. He sits in churches and offices and family compounds. He is sometimes a husband, sometimes a father, sometimes a landlord, sometimes a boss. He is always convinced he is wise. He is always missing the point. And Blessing is also real. She is reading this right now in somebody's house, on somebody's phone, with some rice in the freezer and no money in her pocket. To her we say, you are not invisible. You are not ungrateful for noticing. What is happening to you has a name, and it is not love. The tightest fists lose the most in the end. Not money, but everything money cannot buy back. Drop a comment. Do you know someone like Emmanuel? Have you ever been in Blessing's shoes? Share this story. Somebody in your timeline needs to read it today. Save this and tag that person who needs to loosen their hands a little. Sometimes a story says what years of conversation couldn't. A story for every timeline. Share freely. Feel deeply.
Nobody warned Emmanuel that the body keeps records. It started on a Thursday night in October. Emmanuel had just finished reviewing his accounts, his favorite evening activity. Better to him than television, better than conversation, better than sleep. The numbers were good. The numbers were always good. He closed his laptop with the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed he had life completely figured out. Then he tried to stand up, and his back said no. Not a polite no, not a gentle reminder. A full, catastrophic, lightning bolt down the spine no that sent Emmanuel crashing back into his chair like a sack of gari dropped from a ceiling. He gasped. He grabbed the edge of the table. He tried again. His back said the same thing, louder. "Blessing?" he roared from the study. Blessing walked in, saw him hunched over the chair like a question mark, and had to look away for 3 full seconds before her face was ready to be seen in public again. The doctor said it was a herniated disc. Months of sitting at a desk, no exercise, terrible posture, stress. The body had quietly been building a bill and had now decided to present it. "You need complete bed rest," the doctor said. "Minimum 3 weeks. Someone will need to help you with everything, and I mean everything." Emmanuel blinked. "Everything? Everything." He looked at Blessing. Blessing looked back at him with the calm, neutral face of a woman who had spent 3 years writing grocery lists and counting soap bars. She smiled, slowly, the way sunrise comes. You can't stop it. You just have to watch it happen. "Don't worry," she said sweetly. "I'll take care of you." And God forgive her, she meant it. But God also saw everything she was about to enjoy. For the first time in 3 years, Emmanuel needed to ask for things. Water. He needed to ask for water. He, Emmanuel Adewale, the man who controlled every naira, every grocery list, every market trip, was lying flat in bed, unable to reach the cup on his own bedside table without whimpering. "Blessing, water please." Blessing was in the kitchen. She heard him. She finished what she was doing first. Not because she was wicked. She simply needed a moment to process the spiritual significance of what was happening in her home. She brought the water. She held the cup for him. She watched him drink. And somewhere in the deepest, most honest corner of her heart, a tiny voice said, "So this is what it feels like to hold something someone else needs." By day 3, Emmanuel needed help bathing. This was the moment his pride genuinely left his body, folded itself into a small parcel, and went to sit outside by the gate. By day 5, he needed help getting to the toilet. We will not go into detail. We will simply say that by the time Emmanuel was helped back to bed that afternoon, he was a changed man in ways that no church sermon had ever managed. But the real twist, the thing nobody expected, came on day 7. Her name was Auntie Ngozi, Emmanuel's mother's younger sister. 68 years old, from the village. She had heard her nephew was sick and had boarded a bus from Owerri at 4 in the morning with 3 bags, a cooler of Othe Onugbu, and an energy that could only be described as supernatural. She arrived at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday without calling. She knocked once, walked in, surveyed the entire house in 45 seconds the way generals survey battlefields, pronounced it not too bad, and immediately took over. Within 1 hour, she had rearranged the kitchen. Within 2 hours, she had reorganized the bedroom. By noon, she had somehow located a problem with the bathroom tiles that nobody had noticed in 4 years of living there. By evening, she was cooking, praying loudly, and giving Emmanuel unsolicited updates on every family member's life since 2019. Emmanuel, flat on his back and completely unable to escape, received all of this in silence. But here is where the story turns completely sideways. Auntie Ngozi, on her second day, sat beside Emmanuel's bed and began to talk, the way old women talk when they have waited years for a captive audience. And somewhere between the story of a cousin's failed okra business and the spiritual significance of dreams involving market women, she said something that made Emmanuel go very, very still. "You know your grandfather, your father's father, Ezeogo, that man, hey," she shook her head, "the tightest man God ever created, kept money in the ceiling, would not buy medicine when he was sick. His wife nearly left him 3 times. You know what happened?" Emmanuel said nothing. His back hurt too much to move, but suddenly he forgot about his back. Auntie Ngozi said, he died with 60,000 naira hidden in his ceiling. His children found it when they were removing the zinc roof after the burial. 60,000 naira, wrapped in plastic. Ants had eaten half of it. She paused, and she said, you look exactly like him, by the way. Exact same face, same eyes, same hands. The village people used to say Ezeogo died rich and left poor because the people he should have kept, he lost, and the money he kept so well, the ground swallowed it. Emmanuel stared at the ceiling for a long time after Auntie Ngozi left the room. The ceiling that, now that he thought about it, he had never checked. On day 9 of his bed rest, Emmanuel asked Blessing to bring him his laptop. She brought it. He opened his accounts. He sat there looking at the numbers he had always looked at with pure satisfaction. This time, something was different. The numbers looked back at him like a mirror, and the man in the mirror had his grandfather's face. He closed the laptop. Blessing, he said. She was folding clothes on the other side of the room. She didn't look up. I have been a bad husband. The folding stopped. Silence sat between them so heavily, you could wait. I know, Blessing said quietly. She still didn't look up. I don't know how to explain it, Emmanuel continued, and his voice had a texture he had never heard in it before. Something raw, unpolished, like something that had just had its shell removed. Blessing set the clothes down and sat on the edge of the bed. Emmanuel, she said softly, you controlled everything so tightly that nothing good could come in either. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands, those famous tight hands lying open now on the bedsheet, because his back wouldn't let him clench anything. And he almost laughed. It was too precise to be a coincidence. Even his own body had tried to teach him something. Now, we must talk about what happened with the business. While Emmanuel was on bed rest, his logistics company did not stop. He had 2 staff members, Emeke, his driver and general assistant, and Sandra, his office manager. He trusted them enough to run operations while he recovered. He had left them with clear instructions and access to the operational account. On day 11, Sandra called. Oga, there's a problem. Emmanuel's chest tightened. What problem? That big client, the one that owed us from last quarter, he wants to pay now, full amount, but he says he only pays if you send someone to collect the physical check in person. He doesn't do bank transfer. He says it's his policy. You need to send someone with authorization today by 5 p.m. or the payment window closes. Emmanuel processed this. Okay, tell Emeke. Emeke's tire burst on the expressway this morning. He's waiting for a mechanic. Okay, tell... There's nobody else, sir. Emmanuel looked at his back. His back looked at him with zero sympathy. He turned to Blessing. Blessing was already looking at him with an expression that could only be described as, God has been planning this for a long time. I need you to go and collect a check for me, he said. I'll authorize you. You'll need transport money, and you'll need... He paused, and somewhere deep in his chest, a rusted mechanism that hadn't moved in years gave a loud, grinding, painful creak. Money for expenses for the day. The words came out of him like a tooth extraction. Blessing watched his face the entire time. She did not smile. She was a woman of dignity, but her eyes were having a full celebration. He called her to his bedside, told her where the main card was, told her the PIN, told her to take what she needed for the trip, and his authorization letter. Blessing picked up the card, held it for a moment. 3 years of grocery lists, frozen rice, secret money from her mother-in-law, no transport money, no pocket money, no sanitary pad money. 3 years all sat quietly in her palm as she held that card. How much should I take? She asked. And Emmanuel, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, said words he had never voluntarily said before. Take what you need. Blessing collected the check. She also bought herself a proper meal, got her hair done for the first time in 4 months, and bought Adeze a new school bag, blue with a cartoon sun on it, 4,500 naira. She came home at 6:30 p.m., check in hand, change accounted for, receipt in her purse. She placed the check on Emmanuel's lap. He looked at it, looked at her hair, looked at the blue school bag in little Adeze's arms.
He said nothing, but something in his face moved, the way ice moves when the season changes, slow, inevitable, real. Auntie Ngozi left on day 14. On her way out, she stopped at the door, turned back, and pointed a thick finger at Emmanuel in his bed. I came to check on you, she said, but I think God sent me for a different reason. You hear me? Different reason. Then she adjusted her bag on her head and walked out. 3 days later, Mama Emmanuel came for her Sunday visit. She sat with Blessing in the kitchen while Emmanuel dozed in the room. "He asked me something yesterday," Mama Emmanuel said, her voice careful. Blessing looked up. "What?" "He asked me," she paused, folding and refolding the edge of her wrapper. "He asked me how much money I had been giving you over the years." Blessing's heart dropped into her stomach. "I told him the truth," Mama Emmanuel said. "Every kobo." Silence. "What did he say?" Blessing whispered. Mama Emmanuel looked at her daughter-in-law. Her eyes were bright, complicated, the eyes of a woman who had prayed for something for years and was still processing that it had actually arrived. "He cried," she said. Emmanuel Adewale, the man who had once negotiated the price of his own wedding flowers, who had left his wife with frozen rice and no transport money, who had collected grocery lists like tax forms, lay in bed and wept, not for himself. For the first time in a long time, not for himself. He wept for the mornings Blessing had watched him leave without a word, for the secret bills his mother had quietly paid, for the daughter who had learned to look at her father's face before asking for anything, for the years that had passed in a house full of money and empty of warmth. Kule came to visit the following weekend. He walked into the bedroom and found Emmanuel sitting up, his back slightly better, and Blessing beside him, not at the other side of the room, but beside him, close, not performing closeness, actually close. Kule sat down, looked at both of them, said nothing for a moment. Then, "Emmanuel, did you actually learn something, or is this just the back pain talking?" Emmanuel looked at him, then looked at Blessing, then back at Kule. "Both," he said. "Honestly, both." And for the first time in years, Emmanuel laughed. Not the careful, controlled chuckle he used in business meetings. A real laugh, surprised by itself, a little embarrassed, fully human. Blessing laughed too. Kule laughed. And somewhere in the compound, little Adaize, not knowing what was funny, laughed along just because the sound was coming from inside, and it had been a while. Emmanuel did not become a new man overnight. That is not how people work. He still winced when Blessing spent what he considered too much at the supermarket. She still noticed. They were both human. But now, when he winced, he caught himself. And sometimes he said nothing. And sometimes he said, "That's fine." And those two words, small as they were, meant more to Blessing than a speech. He opened a personal account for Blessing, her own, with her own card, a monthly allowance, not begged for, not negotiated, just given the way a husband gives his wife, freely, regularly, without a receipt attached. The first month, she spent some of it on herself, a dress, earrings, suya on a Tuesday evening because she wanted it. She did not explain to anyone, she did not present receipts, she simply lived, quietly, completely, like a person. She told her mother. Her mother went silent on the phone for a while, then said, "Did something happen to him?" Blessing laughed. "His back gave out." Another silence. Then her mother said, "God works in mysterious ways, my daughter. Very mysterious, very creative ways." Mama Emmanuel the following Sunday sat in the kitchen with Blessing as usual, but this time she came empty-handed. No cooler of soup, no secret money folded in her wrapper. She sat down, looked around, and smiled. The slow, full smile of a woman who no longer needs to fill a gap because the gap has finally been filled by the right person. Little Adaize started asking her father directly again. Small things first, a biscuit, a notebook. He always said yes. Within 2 months, she was bold enough to ask for a bicycle. He said he would check the price online. Some things take longer than others, but he bought the bicycle. The tightest hands in the village finally learned to open, not because they were forced, but because what they were holding on to so tightly turned out to be the very things they were most afraid of losing.